Hey, thanks for joining me here to learn who this guy is in today's report. The crazy man who tied the nation together. I told you it had some strange twists. Well, let's shine the spotlight on this American who had those monumental plans. I think you're going to be as surprised as I was when I read the script that Dennis sent us. Oh, golly, it's the best well, okay, just shut up. At a time when the nation was torn apart, north to south, many were looking at another split that needed to be healed. The division of the nation from east to west. Thousands of miles and millions of acres divide this nation. Abraham Lincoln knew that to bind the nation north and south, he must also bind the nation east to west. He felt so strongly about this that he was willing to spend money that might have gone to the war effort to build a transcontinental railroad. Most engineers knew that a railroad couldn't be built across the Rockies and the high Sierras. The only safe way would be to start, say in Atlanta, head west and go across the plains of Texas and more gentle slopes of New Mexico and Arizona on the way to California. Now, partners, that was a good idea, but also it was an impossible idea. You see, the South, the Confederacy, wasn't about to see a railroad built through their territory. So Lincoln and his engineers had no choice. If they were going to build a transcontinental railroad, they would have to perform miracles. So just 2 days before Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address, he signed into law the enabling act that would permit the railroad to be built. The starting point in the east would be Omaha, Nebraska. No one knew yet from where the western half would start. It took 5 months for word of Lincoln's decision to reach the west. Now, in California, a young civil engineer was thrilled. He not only had wanted a transcontinental railroad to be built for a long, long time. He had already surveyed the Sierra Mountains. He'd conducted a survey that was really a miracle. He found a way for multi-ton locomotives to gently, now listen, this is the key word here, partners. He found a way for multi-ton locomotives to gently cross the mountains. This man's name was Theodore Judah. He was so obsessed with the idea that heavy trains could rise to incredible heights and safety across mountains, people thought he was nuts. In fact, nearly everyone called him Crazy Judah. That is funny, think about it. Crazy he might have been, he convinced 4 merchants in Sacramento to invest in his project. One was a banker. Of course, it'd have to be a banker. One made window blinds and drapes. That doesn't make as much sense as you'd think it might. But anyway, let's go on. 2 owned a hardware store. So Crazy Judah went to Washington to tell Lincoln that his company was ready to start laying track. Judah met with the 4 merchants. When he showed them Abraham Lincoln's signature, they were flabbergasted. You see, dear partners, those partners had only told Judah they would fund his railroad to get him off their backs. They thought there was no way on this earth he would ever succeed. Well, by now this crazy little man had presidential approval and he had Abraham Lincoln's signature to prove it. These merchants, who became known as the Big Four, didn't know what to do. They realized, though, that they had no choice, so their company started to work. It took better than part of a year for the supplies to come from the east, because everything from locomotives to rails to the spikes, whatever it was, were made back there in eastern foundries. There was no industry in the west, and there was no quick way to get all of this stuff to Sacramento. You see, the only thing they needed to move their goods across the nation, a transcontinental railroad, hadn't even been built yet. But as soon as work did get underway, Judah got the shock of his life. What was that? He realized that the Big Four were doing the quickest, sloppiest job they could. Judah now understood that the 4 Sacramento merchants were in it for the money. Judah was in it for the good of the nation. He sadly realized that he and his dream had been betrayed. So he took the long voyage by ship back to the east. He wanted to find investors so he would buy out the Big Four and run his railroad the way it should be run, the right way. But on a shortcut across the Isthmus of Panama, in a land caravan, Judah got sick. Just days after arriving in New York City, crazy Judah died of yellow fever. Well, eventually though, using Judah's original plans, the railroad did cross the Sierras. Another group of railroaders, starting in Omaha, met the crew headed east. Yes, eventually Lincoln's dream was realized. Now, as you know from your history books, the 2 rail companies met just north of the Great Salt Lake in Utah. It seems like everyone involved in the railroad, from the investors from both coasts and the tens of thousands of workmen, mostly Chinese, all were there. That is, except for one. Crazy Judah was not there. As the last hammer stroke was hit, a telegraph operator flashed the word east and west, using the new telegraph line built beside the railroad. Americans celebrated for more than 24 hours. It was as important in that era as the moon landing would be nearly 100 years later. But partners, we must remember this. More than 20,000 pioneers had died while trying to get to California and Oregon. Now that often deadly journey that took 4 months could be done in 6 to 7 days. East had been tied to the West. In many ways, for the first time, it truly was the United States of America. Railroads still there today, but our friend Theodore Judah has been all but forgotten. So do me a favor, please. Never think about that monumental effort that completed the United States of America without thinking about the dreamer who got lost in the shuffle. The man whose crazy vision became a reality. Crazy Judah, who wasn't really that crazy after all. Okay. You know the drill. Look up there, and as soon as this video ends, click the red X in the box, the farthest over, nothing else, and you'll come right back here to the report page. I love you. Go get 'em, Tigers!